everyone has been through budgeting before, and I think they're all familiar with it.
So you want to try to go through it just kind of quickly, or
Yeah, if you want to do
if
that.
necessary?
I mean, I don't think we really have to. I think everyone's been through it.
Right. So maybe just open it up by asking anybody have any questions.
Yeah, sure thing. So just to kind of set the stage for the meeting, in regard to environmental protection and sanitation, I think within our community we've been hearing from people, and I think the primary thing that we want to advocate for in the fiscal year 26 budget has to do with composting. Right now, we see the community composting program that Mark was running being cut, and so we want to advocate for that to get funding back as programs funding, and then for capital funding, uh, I want to advocate for getting orange bins. There are orange compost bins you see around the city, but we don't have any in this district. And they are specialized bins where you have an app to open them. You can go to them and drop off your compost at any time. So I think between those two, I think those make kind of the most sense in terms of our budgetary asks for environment and sanitation. And I don't really see a point in us having other ones unless anyone has any other recommendations. But I think it's more impactful if we have only one priority and making that composting.
So just one of the possible suggestion again around composting, given that we don't have community composting, we do have curbside composting. How about if we put a request in to fund more education around curbside composting? Because we know that part of the challenges is buildings are not cooperating with curbside composting, and some of that I think has to do with education. So how about that as another potential expense item to fund further outreach by sanitation, educating, and also maybe combine that with recycling. Of course, there was a recent report that I mentioned last month from Sanitation indicating that recycling has also declined. So maybe have like one item to do education to fund more educational programs in sanitation for composting and recycling.
Yeah, I mean, I think the issue with that is that as we've been through different budgetary negotiations with the full board, those kinds of things I feel like always tend to kind of get cut or pushed down. And that's why I kind of just want to double down on kind of one ask, and that's to actually get the program going. Does anyone else have thoughts?
Can I ask a question?
Yep.
Is your thinking on this that this is a better way to go than to have these sort of, the composting sites that we've had at Grow NYC and at Common Point? Are you thinking that this might be a better way to go than to use those sites instead? Because we know that they are now unfunded as well. Just wanting to think about where your thoughts are with this, because I know you guys think more about this than I do.
Yeah, so the programmatic ask would be to fund those programs for those sites that are no longer being funded.
Okay, so you're asking for two things. You're asking for the sites to be funded for the Grow NYC and the Common Point and so on, but you're also asking for curbside. Now here's my question. Are those two separate priorities? Because I believe sanitation is involved in the first one, in the orange bins that you have the great little app where you ding and you bang and you drop your crap. But then for the composting sites, isn't that a different agency that manages that piece, or is that also sanitation?
It's sanitation, Mark. You know,
composting now falls in sanitation.
So even the disposal the funding that you had went to fund sanitation to help you deal with that? Because I thought you were working with, maybe I'm remembering way back when, but I thought you were working with the botanical garden people.
Okay, so the funding for botanical gardens to do that came from sanitation.
Okay, but I still think we may need to write two separate priorities for that because they are two separate types of composting. They are composting, but I think, and Mark, you can correct me, but I think some of the feedback that we got was that when you combine two things, the agency only pays attention to one of those things. And I think what you're trying to do, Matt, is you're going to give us composting or bust. So this is the only things, this is the only topic we're asking for. But I think what we're going to have to do is create two priorities. One is for the composting sites, and then one is for orange bins throughout the district. But I think
Yep.
the orange bins is a smart idea because, quite frankly, buildings like my own, they don't do composting. So now I can't do composting, period. I have nowhere to do composting. Whereas if the bins were there, at least now that, the sites are gone and my building doesn't do it, I'd have somewhere to go. And I
Yep.
know it's not the best. It's not really what composting is meant to be because of how they process all that stuff that goes to the orange bins. But I think it's worthwhile. So Mark, am I wrong in thinking that that should be two priorities?
Oh no, 100% it should be two priority. And I think Matt was saying the orange bins might be capital, right?
Yeah,
Is
I'd
that
have
what
to
you're saying,
imagine.
Matt? Is that your understanding?
That'd be my guess. Yeah, because you're actually having to pay for the physical
Mm.
things to be bought and then installed, whereas the programmatic funding would be to then continue out the compost sites.
Right. That's we just need to confirm that the orange bins, because I know the feedback that we've gotten on this is that said that the city council members now fund the orange bins.
Yeah, and I reached out to Lynn's office on this, and I know Heather, you guys reached out, and I think just having this be in our budgetary asks is another way to ask her office.
Right. So the feedback we may get is approach your city councilor, but okay, at least we could document it.
Yep.
Right. I mean, the whole point of this process isn't just to get the city agency to fund it. It's also to get our elected officials on board with what we believe are the needs of this community. And I mean, I have been seeing some posts in groups online where people are saying, where do I take my composting now? And the answer is dying.
Well,
Even for
again,
me,
I'm sorry.
I
Go
used to
ahead, Howard.
take it into Union Square because I knew I didn't have to wait. If I was getting a lot, I knew that I couldn't wait till Sunday to drop off at the site in Forest Hills. I would just throw it all in a bag and lug it to Union Square and drop it off. But they're funded in the same way because they're Grow NYC that you guys are funded, that the Forest Hills Green Team was funded. So we really are out of space, and I think the Compost Collective does good work, but they're very hard to engage with because it's a very complicated educational process where all I want to do is drop my stuff off and go home. I'm not looking to do anything else in my life.
Yeah.
I'm one of those people.
Well,
Um,
again, that's why I suggested a separate expense priority to fund sanitation to do education around curbside composting, because Heather, that should be an option for you, right? In other words, if your bill right now, as we speak, in Queens and Brooklyn, curbside composting is mandatory. The issue is there's no penalties if you don't do it. So there's no incentive for any of these buildings to do curbside composting.
right. It's not like back in the day when they rolled out recycling.
Correct.
Because I remember being a tenant and my one landlord kept saying, "Oh, you young people, it's your fault. I keep getting fines." And I was like, "No, we kind of like the recycling. We get it. We're super recyclers." I think he was the one that was, because he was a shyster. And I think he was trying to get away with having recyclable goods in his trash. And of course, if they saw it, they were to fine you. And he was getting fined. And they would do that for a while. But I think with curbside composting, they're not doing that
Correct.
because these buildings are just not participating. But I also think it's a little bit of a challenging thing because it's food waste. So, I mean, I think you're going to find it. You would have a reason to find almost every building, even if it participated, because my building was given one little bin for a 6-floor building.
Yep.
That I could fill that up myself in a week's time easy. And if it's the holidays, I'll have it filled up in 3 days.
Right. Well,
So,
again, this is the challenge of what's going on. So again, I just to ask Gina, I know you haven't said anything. What do you think? So right now, Matt's proposing we just do the orange bins for capital. We do the restoring curbside the community composting for the expense. You think that's okay? And I'm suggesting one more expense item to fund sanitation to do further education around composting, curbside composting.
I mean, I like those ideas. I feel like education is a good component because I feel like a lot of times things just kind of happen in a community and you kind of don't know how to go about things. And I feel like education would be a good component.
I mean, that's kind of like what I think too. And again, keep in mind, it's not for this cycle, it's for next year. So even more the reason, because I think by next year, see, the reason there are no penalties now is because they're delaying it until it gets rolled out citywide. And I think there's been some delays into when it's going to the other 3 boroughs, but hopefully by the next funding cycle, it'll be 5 boroughs, which, then hopefully the penalties will start kicking in. And that's why even better to have, I think, an educational component.
Okay. All right, that sounds good to me. Okay.
Like, what's the worst thing, right? Getting denied, and that's it, right? So
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
might as well do it.
Yep. Okay.
I have a question. I guess, like, when you guys decide on expenses and I guess topics, how do you guys decide on it? Like, where does it come from? Is it just like something that you guys notice in the community, or?
Right. So, Jeannie, asking, how do we come up with these items?
Yeah, like, how does it
Yeah.
come about? Because, like, I feel
Yeah.
like
Again, this is open to you as a committee member. If you see something that pertains to any one of these departments, so we're doing like sanitation. What are the areas? Environmental, sanitation.
That's it.
Right. So those two. So anything that pertains to environmental and sanitation, you see something that you think needs some funding, you can recommend it, and then we can discuss it as a committee and make a decision if we then want to put it as one of our budget priorities. And then what happens is that by June 30th, all the committees will be submitting their budget, their budget suggestions, their budget priorities, and then so then Heather's going to be putting them all together, sending it out to all the chairs, and then the chairs will then be voting and in terms of priorities, what they want to make their number 1 priority, what they want to make their, again, for expense items, there are up to 25, and for capital items, there's up to 40. And then over the summer, we're going to send out a questionnaire to the community with some of these priorities listed and get feedback from them. And then in September, when we get the feedback from both the community members and from the committees, committee chairs, we'll then have a chairs meeting when we'll then review all the priorities and then make a recommendation to the full board. And then October, we'll then review it. And as you can see, this process, there's a lot of people involved. So the past couple of years when we've done this process, when it gets to the board, there's usually not much discussion. There's some, but minimal amount. And then we pretty much pass those priorities. And then once the priorities are passed, we send it to the city. We get feedback from the different city agencies. And then this year, what we've done is we've tried to respond to some of the feedback, and we've gotten further feedback, and we're trying to modify the process for this cycle. As Heather alluded to, we came to learn that it's better to be more specific than less specific. So that's why we're kind of trying to separate them out. But in terms of where it comes from, it comes from you. If you see something for this committee, and or if you see anything in the community that you think needs attention, you can I guess you can email the community board and they'll pass it on to the appropriate committee. So that's where it comes from.
So Matt, can I ask a question? There's other budget priorities that you guys had last year, that deal with rain gardens, that deal with rodents, of that nature. Are you saying that, you're going to get rid of those? Even the rain gardens?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd like to just double down on the composting.
Yeah, my only concern is and I understand that is with the rodents, the city's already, we know that they're focused on that. They've hired a rat czar, whatever that. Can't wait to see that on a resume someday. But the rain gardens, I think are helpful to the community in that, it does help mitigate flooding in areas that are problematic. It does help us be productive with the rain that we do get. And we do have key sections of our community that do get flooded that could benefit from rain gardens. Does your committee have any information about, whether or not whether they're continuing with the program, what the situation is, with that?
I mean, they have rain gardens around the district and they're operating. I'm not sure about adding additional ones and where those might be most needed. Because again, if we want to be very specific here, and we can then say, oh, we want to have an orange bin at McDonald Park, I think it would be best if we did want to include that to say we want to have a rain garden at X and Y intersection. So unless we have that, I'm not sure it's worth it to include.
Okay. All right, so then any other budget priorities that you have for this year will be getting rid of for now.
Yep.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Okay. Should we put it to a vote then about sending along these budgetary priorities, sending along having to do with orange bins, having to do with curbside education, and having to do with reinstating the funding for compost sites? All those in favor on the committee say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. Abstentions? The ayes carry it. Okay. Should I put this in writing and send it over to Mark and you, Heather?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, I'm sorry. I couldn't toggle back to the screen appropriately.
No
I
worries.
apologize.
No worries.
Yes, we would love that because we're going to have some work to do with this over the summer while the rest of you
Okay.
all are breaking.
Is putting the geographic specificity helpful in these requests?
I mean, I think if I'm hearing you correctly in regards to the orange bins, you want
Yep.
them throughout. You want them in key residential areas, right?
Yep.
You want them in like I would be thinking, and tell me if I'm wrong, we're thinking like Queens Boulevard, Woodhaven Boulevard. We're thinking like 63rd Drive.
Yep.
Where else am I missing? Maybe Yellowstone.
71st, 71st Avenue, Queens Boulevard. I
Well,
thought you can too.
Yeah. Continental.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, so I think we could suggest some main thoroughfares for them to
Okay.
do that. That would be fine. And I would think throughout, because we have to remember like maybe like 108th Street
Yeah.
as well, because that would hit down. And that I'm thinking about the sections of our community that we always think about like the dead center. We never think about like so I think Woodhaven's a good one, and maybe along Union Turnpike.
Yeah.
Because that kind of bookends, yeah, that ought to work.
Yeah. And again, I think Heather, we would have to also confirm if it's capital or expense.
Yes, and Christine can do that for us.
Yeah.
So when you send that over, classify how you believe it is, but just ask Christine if she could double check with sanitation on that, and she'll do that for us.
Perfect.
Because I'm not sure, it may not hit the financial level of capital.
Gotcha.
It's not just the financial level, it's also the usable life.
Right.
Like how, because they are used by the public, my guess is they're beaten up and abused so much that they may have to be replaced in a certain, you know, it's like, it's not going to be, I can't see one of those, I think, what is it, 15 years, Mark?
It's only like 5 years.
Oh, 5 years?
Yeah.
Yeah, but even 5 years, I think, is a bit of because
Yeah.
again, I mean, if you look at like remember those sanitation bins that kind of the door opened and you could take the trash bin out, empty it, put it back in and close the door?
Yeah.
I
Yep.
cannot tell you how many of those, not just in our district, but throughout the city I see, and my compulsion is to shut the door. Like I always see them, and it's partly because the door can't latch anymore. It's not
Yeah,
like sanitation's being lazy, it's just that it's not clicking.
Yeah, because people shove things in there and then like try to close it, and yeah.
It's a mess. Okay. So yeah, just send those off to us as soon as you're ready.
Okay. Sounds good.
Right. And I hope that, over the summer, when Heather starts sending around the requests for committees, that hopefully we get a couple more people. That'll be great.
Well, that's the goal. And this is the hard part. I mean, because right now, your committee was nice and tight to begin with. You lost Katrina. I get that. And TT as well, from the committee. So we've had some changes. And so I think that, we've got like 12 new members. So I believe your committee will grow in size. And we're also looking, to see how committees will be structured moving forward. So, hang in there with us. We're here to support it. But the other thing too is that some committees are just massive. Some committees just aren't. And you can sort of have committee size jealousy, but sometimes managing a large committee can be kind of like hugging an octopus. It's just slimy and unruly. And so I think that you can work smart, and you can work in a very streamlined fashion with a smaller committee. So I think sometimes it can be a blessing, not a curse. So, but definitely we are going to be sending around over the summer committee signups. for folks and committee leadership signups as well. So we're very excited. I think, Matt, you've been doing a fantastic job. Bless you. I think you sneezed. At least it seemed that way.
Yeah.
Oh, you coughed. Okay. Well, bless you anyway. So yeah, just hang in there with us. Just hang in there. We're going through some growing pains, which is a good thing. And I think part of the reason we lost some of our membership too is just like since COVID, people are changing their lives. You know, people are moving. And that's how we lost several members of our board. We had one person who got an opportunity to go study in Milan. I mean, I'm getting on that plane. I don't know about anybody else, you know, and we had one person whose wife got an opportunity in California. I don't think he was going to say no, you know, so there's all sorts of things that are changing. And I think hopefully this new board will settle in. So, but you guys have done a great job. And Matt, thank you for stepping up with the solid waste advisory board. I don't think you've had a meeting lately with that, correct?
We had a meeting the other night.
Okay. Good.
Do they continue to focus on composting?
Yep.
Yeah.
They're very focused on the one that they were moving at Queensbridge.
Right, the park. Yeah, they're closing down the compost site there.
Yep.
Yeah.
I thought about that the other day. I was taking the train to Queens Plaza to switch to the 7, and I looked down and I was like, oh, what a freaking tragedy. I mean, it really is. I don't have it in front of me. What else was on the agenda for this evening?
That was it.
Oh,